amazing. And I only just finished Picard.
Wow.
Which
All right.
was
Well,
good.
very important that we have our TV watching kind of settled. I know what I'm doing later. Thank you for joining us this morning. We have a really great episode today that we put together with a very special guest. First, I want to say thank you. Good morning, Justin. Good morning, Marianne, our usual kind of contributors to our great live streams. But today, our special guest is Christian Zapata. And Christian is Valiant's project manager, project director, and he built a lot of the processes and the underlying how we do it at Valiant. So, Christian, we're going to take a minute to introduce yourself, and then we can kind of get started.
Sure, and I appreciate that, George, and thank you for having me on.
Yep.
A little bit about myself. I've been in the IT field for a few years now. I started as a support engineer and on-site tech. I found myself very interested in the business side of IT, which led to a few years of account management and client strategy, which is where I was able to kind of get my introduction into project management. And then when I saw that there was a need here at Valiant to create that project team and build out that project cycle, it was a perfect fit. So I've been here for over 3 years now. And yeah, I'm very excited to get into this project management cycle that we created here at Valiant and dive into some of the benefits of project management.
Awesome. That sounds great. We're super excited to get started. You can dive in there. So beyond that, just please like and subscribe to our YouTube. It's really important that we get people to see it and when it comes out. Thank you, Matt. And just to kind of get some baseline, one of the biggest problems we find in technology is that people use the same words to define different things. So, Christian, what's project management? It sounds silly, but really it's important we define it.
No, it's a great question because I'm sure you ask 100 people what project management is, you'd probably get like 100 different answers,
right?
Because it's so versatile, right? But I guess the standard definition that a lot of people go by is defined as the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques needed to meet the requirements of a project. Now, I've tried to explain this to my family, and with the exception of my wife, I think if you ask anybody, they'll just say he works in computers. It's a little complex. So I'll try to simplify it a little bit and see if we can have a clear understanding of what project management is. And I guess the best place to start is, what is a project? So put simply, a project is a series of temporary tasks or steps that need to be completed to reach a goal or deliver a service. So those tasks, however, have boundaries or restrictions, such as time, for example, a deadline, resources, such as what engineers or materials are available, and finally, a budget, because nobody wants to pay more than what was budgeted for that project or what was forecasted for that project.
Right.
So completing those steps that we mentioned that is a project within those boundaries or restrictions is what we call the scope of the project, or the target, the goal that we want to hit.
Right.
Project manager is basically responsible for the overall success of the project, ensuring that these projects stay within that scope or that budget, making tough, quick decisions as needed, and leading the team while serving as the point of contact for communication for the client. So to give a real life example of that, I guess we can use a construction build out. There's many of those in the city, right? In a construction build out, you have many vendors and many roles, such as electricians, plumbers, carpenters, painters. These different roles and vendors work within the project, and they all intertwine, right? So a project manager is responsible for ensuring that every single one of those roles stay within budget, timeline, expectations of the client. And they're also responsible for the communication. A client wouldn't go to an electrician to ask for an update on the bathroom lighting or the low voltage wiring. They would ask the project manager. And the project manager, although he doesn't do the physical work, he wouldn't be putting in the lighting himself or pulling the wires. He would know the status of all the work being done. It's his job or her job to know that information, not serving as a messenger or middleman, but proactively providing updates to the client. And if something goes wrong, the project manager is responsible for figuring out the quickest solution. So I guess the best way to illustrate it would be like a conductor in an orchestra. There's various instruments being played at the same time in an orchestra, right? But it may not look like he's doing much because all he's doing is keeping the tempo, but the conductor is the one that's leading, keeping that tempo and making sure that everyone's playing their part correctly and in harmony and synced up. It sounds like a symphony. And the project manager is the same for a project. He's responsible for making sure that the tempo and everything gets completed on time and properly. Everyone's working together, and when that happens, it just creates some like beautiful music, really.
So you're saying basically not like a fifth grade orchestra concert.
Exactly.
Just speaking from experience here. Not to knock any fifth graders or any, because I think it's great that they're playing music, but it's rough when it goes bad, and you can see when someone's out of tune. That you're using that analogy and going further that. So and I think one other thing that's really important is that if there's a single person to go to as a client to like find out what's happening, like a single, hey, what's happening with this thing? I think it's really important, kind of mental, kind of, or like who do I go to? What do I do? How do I handle this? So,
Exactly.
so you know, one of the things that are really important is like, okay, great. So I need someone to kind of be the orchestra and the conductor. It's fine, but what does that really mean, though? Like, what's like if I don't have it? What happens? You know, I mean, I'm gonna date myself here. Old Valiant. I mean, I used to build the project, run the project, close the project, and it worked out great all the time. That's not
Get
true.
out of there.
It was no, it was terrible. It was actually terrible, and that's why but seriously, what's some of the like reasons that underline the data shows for
Yeah.
projects?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because if you look at some of the stats that Matt put up here, so they're kind of scary. I mean, one
Right.
of them is only 23% of organizations use standardized project management practices, while only 7% of those of organizations have any standard practices at all, meaning they're not really following any kind of procedure or standard to roll out or implement new software or new projects. What's also interesting is that the average IT project overran this budget by 27%. And that's on average, meaning most IT projects go over. And
Right.
1 out of every 6 turn into what they call a black swan, which means that it's 200% over the original budget and 70% over the original allotted time. So it's terrible solutions in a way. And what's also interesting is that 17% of those IT projects go so bad that they can threaten a company's livelihood. And
Right.
we've seen that with some big companies such as Kmart that went under strictly because of a failed IT project. So it's really interesting that those statistics show the importance of project management, especially in the IT field.
Right.
And here at Valiant, we do it a little bit differently. We took those standards that are normalized in project management and somewhat customized it or created a particular process that isn't quite textbook, but it's not textbook only not only because of the services we offer, but also because of the way that we customize it and really tailor it to our clients.
Right. It's interesting, and I think part of it too is that the project manager does a lot more than a normal PM would. Right. I mean, this kind of bringing that account management, client advocacy aspect back to the to working together. As it's more because Valiant is not just we don't just do the project once, right? That's really part of it.
Exactly. And as
Right.
project managers here, we're more linked to account management, which account managers here at Valiant see our clients and they serve as client advocates, and they see the clients as partners. And as
Right.
a project manager, we do the same because we understand that these clients that we're doing these projects with, they're our partners in the sense of if the project goes well for our partner, it goes well for us. Because
Right.
as you said, we're ultimately going to be the ones supporting and being there with the client post the project, which is a little different from most construction build outs or other types of
Right.
projects, which is what makes us kind of unique in that sense.
Yeah, it makes it kind of hard sometimes when you're talking to construction folks because they don't fully understand. Like, we're going to be here after this. And they're like, what? And they don't really understand it. So
Exactly.
that's great. That really kind of puts it. Those stats are terrifying. I know just kind of go there, but like, so all right. So we know that a good definition. We know what we're doing, and I think we should go over how we do our project process. How you in the last 3 years really refine this. And when you came here, you kind of found, I would say shambles is a strong word.
It's not far from it.
It's not far from it. So I would like to hear, like, what's our stages? What's our steps? How do we do it? How do we define it? How do we put it out there? So I think let's just kick it off then.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll go into a little bit of the project cycle, but first off, I just want to say that we have a secret sauce, which is our engineering team. In reality, their experience and their ability to not only deliver a good, not only have that great deliverable, but do it with like great customer service has really proven to be the difference and what separates us from most IT firms and IT companies. So shout out to that engineering team that they do great work. So
They really do.
that being said, the project cycle usually starts with the first phase, which is the initiation and conception phase. And what this phase is actually way before a project even begins. When there's an idea of a project or a potential project, we begin tracking that progress with an internal ticket. And those opportunities may come in different ways. We have the account management team and the VCIOs who regularly speak and have these meetings with our clients, going over their budgets, their needs, any concerns that they may have, and look for ways to improve their day-to-day and their workflows. But we also have our reactive team that's always keeping an eye open to see if there's a particular pain, point of pain for the client that they can
Right.
improve on, and try to see if they can start an opportunity that way. And if there's a need for a project, they create a ticket, which then gets all the information, all those details get put into that ticket, and then that opportunity gets sent over to our system architect team for planning and definition phase.
Right. And I think the plan definition phase is definitely a piece that we didn't have in the past. I gotta say, of all the things I think are special sauce, was this piece, because in the past it was kind of like, hey, I got this idea. This client's gonna need a server. I'm gonna go to a Dell web page, whip it up, and it's gonna be 5 hours of work. And then when we found it was not really good. So JP, I think you and Christian work super tightly together on that. So could you just go through how that works?
Yeah, definitely. We go through a pretty specific process planning out any project, and so we do have this backlog of project templates that we've built and refined over the years of things that we do repeatedly. And every time, and we'll get to it at the end, when we finish a project, we do go back and review against the template how well that did. And based on that, we've been able to refine these base templates for certain like server rollouts and email migrations where we kind of do them regularly. But even with those, what we do is once we put together a plan for a project, and that's going to include all the steps involved, the technology, the software, the hardware, all that stuff. It goes through a couple of checks and balances. We have first the engineering team reviews it to make sure that everything that's being put into the project, A, makes sense, B, does, they don't see any problems with it, and C, that the project plan fits into their idea of how long it's going to take. Then the project itself goes to the VCIOs, the account managers, who, like Christian said, are the client advocates, and their job is to go through that project as well and make sure it hits all the things that the customer actually needs and
Right.
isn't, even from a budgetary perspective, if we put something together that, oh, this will solve all the problems this client has, but it costs $200,000 for a 20-person company, account managers are going to say, well, look, this is not a good solution because
Right.
it doesn't fit these parameters. And based on that sort of internal back and forth, we come out with a proposal to the client that is, engineering has signed off on, the account managers have signed off on, that everybody kind of agrees that this is the best of all three worlds of everything that we can do. And it is hopefully accurate in the forecast since everybody's had a chance to review it.
Right. I think another part that's really important is that at any point, really what happens is people can really kick it back to the beginning if
Yeah.
it's not meeting the need. I mean, and we don't kind of we don't force a solution. Don't try to hammer in the round peg in a square hole on these sort of things, because
Yeah, if it's not going to work, we say, it's going to work, start
just
over. And
just speaking from the old, that happened. We've done that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of why we have this process. I mean,
Yeah.
unfortunately, processes get created because of problems that happened in the past. So, all right, great. So now we have the initiation. We know what we're doing. We have planned. It's defined. We got great statement of work. What happens then? How do we get moving?
Sure. So then after that, after the planning and definition phase, right, measured twice, cut once. Then once the VCIO and the client agree to the terms of the project, we begin the launch and execution phase. And that phase starts with an internal meeting with all the different parties involved internally. That may include purchasing to make sure that all the equipment is ordered and delivered on time. That would include all the engineering teams involved, a reactive as well if needed, and even training with Marianne, who we'll deep dive a little bit into later as far as the benefits of that. But we involve everybody internally. We go over everything. Everybody's pretty much aware of the project at that point because of the planning and definition phase. So it's really just kind of reviewing and start putting some dates that make sense and scheduling it out. So once that's set, we go to the client we schedule a client kickoff. The VCIO will usually introduce myself or one of the other project managers, in which case then we schedule that client kickoff. We try to be very detailed in that client kickoff. We go over all the different phases of the project. We make sure that we start allocating some time for the engineers, and we start putting some dates in the calendar that make sense for the client as well. And and then it starts. The project begins. The work is scheduled, and we kick off the actual project.
I think one of the things I just want to add in here that just watching you guys do this for over years now is that one thing you've done really well is defining the client's responsibilities to have success. I think that's one of the pieces that gets overlooked in many projects where you're not telling them, hey, listen, we need some feedback here at this point, or we need to be able to know what your thoughts on this. And this is a stop point. And I really that's one thing I just to call it out, that you you and your team have really done really well over the past couple of years in improving that part of it, because no project will fail as quickly as if the client's not engaged in it. So you need that champion, that sort of thing. So great. So now here, and well, all right. Now in the middle of the project, what happens in the middle? Like, what's the meat and potatoes? Like, what's the deal?
Yep.
So,
and like you said, it's the meat and potatoes right here: monitoring and review phase. And this is the part that the project manager is most involved in, because essentially this is where he starts conducting, or she starts conducting. Right, starts monitoring all the billable hours on a weekly basis. Gives updates to not only the client but internally if there's any updates that need to be sent to the team. That communication line is always open. When that work is scheduled, sometimes in projects things may not go exactly according to plan.
right.
So it's the project manager's responsibility to kind of know ahead of time when things are already starting to shift. And one of the things that we've implemented here for those dynamic changes is change orders, which is when we know something isn't going to go according to the original scope for whatever reason, we make sure that as soon as possible we provide a change order which explains some of the differences in the scope of that's key to a successful project, because changes, sometimes you can't control all the details out of your hand, but if a quick project manager that's quick to make that decision will still lead to a successful project. So that's very important. We also do the training during this phase. If there's any new software or any new implementation in their workflows, Marianne provides the training, and we make sure that that's an essential piece to through this phase. And eventually we do the go live, the actual date that we make the change or implement the new software or open up the new store, whatever it may be. So these are the different steps between the monitoring and review phase. And this is really the meat and potatoes. This is when the project actually gets done.
Right.
This
is like, unfortunately, this is the really visible part, and the other parts are so critically important because you don't see them. They're kind of like behind the scenes, behind the curtain. But if the first three parts aren't done well, this part goes really bad, especially that go live. we've all been there at the projects that go badly. So, and once again, just to kind of reiterate the training piece, I think that's important because you make this massive investment, but we'll get there in a second. I just want to just kind of keep hammering on that one because
super important.
It's the piece that everyone kind of ignores, and unfortunately, and really, really good, smart people really get it why you do it. So it's really important. And I know I was super happy, Marianne. Love it.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, it's great. She's great. I love it. All right. So, all right, we went live. We're done. The project, everything's going. Are we done?
Not yet. There's a completion and feedback phase. And as you mentioned, some of these companies that do projects, they don't necessarily have this cycle. So they may get to the point of the go live and think, well, the project is complete because we handed over that deliverable or that new item. But in our case, as I mentioned earlier, we're partners. So we want to make sure that once the project is completed, we have that kind of closure meeting with the client, make sure that we gauge their satisfaction, make sure that they're happy with what we produced. And if there's anything that we need to perhaps put a couple extra hours in to make sure that they get to that satisfaction level, we happily make sure that we get there. We also work with internally to have a postmortem, which is basically where we review all the different steps in the project plan that Justin mentioned earlier. We review it internally and see what went well, what went wrong, what things can we improve on. And we've seen that these meetings are crucial for future projects, because essentially what we do there is really just improve the entire cycle, improve the project plans. And we've seen the impact it's had on the newer projects.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a bit, I mean, this to kind of hammers home, for us as a managed service provider, when we do projects for many of our customers, is that we're going to be living with whatever solution we put in is our solution. And we're going to own it. We're going to have to care and feed for it. And if we do a bad job, we're going to be not only having a dissatisfied customer, but very poor outcome for our team because they have to support something that wasn't done correctly. So that goes back to just getting it all right the first time and learning the hard way. So unfortunately, for better or worse. So I guess kind of moving along. I mean, this sounds all great and all, but I'm a customer. Why do I need all this? I just want a server migrated to Azure. I don't understand why it's not done. Could you just move the Azure server? Thanks, please. So, but why are we doing this? What's the benefit?
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to having this cycle. First of all, customer success is what we have in mind from the beginning. As we saw from the very first phase of the project, we're thinking of the very end already. We're thinking of how we're going to support whatever we implement. So customer success is the most important part. And we understand that whenever there's new equipment, new software, or a new workflow that we implement on a client, the key to that is to be accepted by the staff. Ultimately, maybe the point of contact or the principals there want this idea or this new concept, but if the staff isn't in agreement with it, it's usually not going to be great. So what we want to do is do a good job of letting the customer and the staff know the benefits of this. And the key to that is knowledge. And that's, I guess, where I transition over to Marianne, because that's why we put such an emphasis on training, because if a client is trained, if the staff is trained, then they can understand why this change was needed.
Right.
Yeah. And this has become such a huge part. And I think part of it is just from our observation of not only clients who get new software and then don't make the most of it, but even clients who get new software and don't understand like the value or what they're supposed to be doing. And if it's implemented fine on our end, there's still so much user end things that can go wrong. And we always want to prevent that.
Right.
So I think that that's really important, especially for, you spent X number of dollars on this project to have all your data up in the cloud, and people aren't really using it and they're still just sending stuff by email.
Right.
Like, that's a problem. So it's really good for adoption, for getting your users into it, to getting them be satisfied, to getting them to be more productive with the things that you provide them. And the nice thing is that, I mean, we talked about this entire time, but every client is different, and we do want to tailor it to your needs. So sometimes we talk to the clients before it even gets out there. We talk to the users, tell them, like, here's what the benefits are, here's how you use it, isn't this great? We usually do trainings afterwards. I've done a lot of like Office 365 trainings because people like Teams is new to them, using cloud-based storage is new, and I show a couple of tips and tricks, but people are still going to use it differently. So we always try and talk with the client first and really like get what they need, know their workflow a little bit more, because they know their workflow way better than we do. We don't want to say, here's how you do it, A, B, C, and D. And they're like, well, we don't C, and what about E? So
got it. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, we see ourselves, I think one of the reason, one of the, even internally, when we adapt the technology more fully, it really helps. Like us adapting Teams as a company standard a couple of years ago really helped us transition to this remote work cycle that we're in now.
And you want to get rid of that shadow IT thing where some people are using Teams, some people are still using Hangouts, and keep it all in one place for compliance and productivity and all the.
Right. It's really true. And, one thing that's really this out of it all, we really want to be is that transparency with our customers, and our clients, and actually even more so our staff. So they know why we're doing these projects with the customer. Everyone has to kind of be on the same page, look at it the same way. So it's really clear. And so it's on both. Once again, we're supporting it. So if our team was like, well, why did they do this project? This is terrible. This is a terrible solution. I don't get it, and that causes a problem, because then there's a dissonance between the principals, the staff, and our service. And one of the things that I really love of this solution or process to do this is the checks and balances factor. It's such an important piece, as one thing that we instituted in our company a couple of years ago was a challenger rule, where someone can say, can stop a project, stop a process, stop a thing without repercussion, without fear of retaliation. Because if you have that in the engineering mindset, then things get better always. Because if people are afraid to say something, that's you could like really cause either catastrophic damage or ruin the client's business, ruin our relationship with the client. So we want engineers and anyone in our staff to be able to say, hey, this is not working, this is why. And at any point they can do that. And it's really important. And the project process really reflects that every day. That's really great. And I think it's super useful. And, beyond that, I mean, we have well, you guys have any other thoughts on this? What else we could put together into a neat bow, Christian? I mean, you live in this world. So I'd love to hear you kind of sum it up.
No, absolutely. And honestly, I think you hit the nail on the head with the transparency and the checks and balances. What this does is that establishes a trust system with our clients. They trust our recommendations because they know that we're not trying to sell them something just because we need the funds, or they know that if we ask them to do a project, it's because it's for their best interest. And when that trust is there, it just creates a great project workflow. So here at Valiant, last 3 years, we've had a great record of really successful projects. And in this past year, in fact, we've done a lot of migrations, like Microsoft Office 365 migrations with Teams and SharePoint and Azure Cloud work. And that work has enabled a lot of our clients to continue their operations with very minimal disruptions during this whole pandemic, this whole COVID-19 pandemic, which has, it's something to be proud of that we produced that type of work. So in conclusion, I would say up to now, Valiant's project cycle, that's really what it is in a nutshell. And it's been something that has brought successful projects to our partners, and it's something that we can be proud of, something that we continually improve. And I'm looking forward to some of the future projects that we're also going to be able to get involved with. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Super. That's great. It's really exciting. And, it's just great having everyone here. We hope that this was really educational for someone to understand our process and our culture and our business and how we approach these technological problems and how to break it down into something that's useful for our clients and for our staff. And Marianne, Justin, and Christian, thank you so much for joining us today. I thought it was great.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it. This is like one of the ones we're going to do this again with other people on our team, just to kind of understand what they do. As Christian says, most people just think I fix computers, but there's so much going on. We do a lot of other stuff. So, and with that, once again, please like and subscribe. We have some we have a super fun, relaxed episode coming on Friday. It's like nerding out on movie tech, fact versus fiction. So who knows? We're gonna get
future prediction,
little future perfect kind of thing. A little bit what's gonna happen, a little predictability, maybe some streamlined modern. We don't know what's gonna happen. This will be great. So we're really looking forward to it. And so please join us. And once again, please like and subscribe. And have a great day. Talk to you all later. Thanks everyone. Bye now.
Thank you.